Welcome to the world of science fiction, where extraordinary tales come to life. Enjoy the journey. The shuttle's death scream harmonized with the storm. Mike Harrison wrestled the control stick as another lightning strike fried his starboard stabilizer. The instrument panel sparked, filling the cockpit with the acrid smell of burning circuits and ozone. Through the cracked viewport, an alien ocean stretched endless and hostile, its surface churning jade beneath clouds that pulsed with bioluminescent lightning. "Mayday! Mayday!" he growled into dead static. "Colony Control, this is Search and Rescue 779. Primary engines gone, bleeding altitude at 200 meters per second. Does anyone copy?" Nothing. Just the white noise of a universe that had stopped listening 3 jumps ago when the nav computer glitched and sent him through an uncharted gate. His emergency beacon wailed its automated distress call into the void, but Mike knew the truth. He was too far from shipping lanes, too far from anything human. The shuttle bucked, throwing him against his harness hard enough to knock the wind from his lungs. Warning lights painted the cabin crimson. Hull temperature critical, fuel cells rupturing, gravity compensation failing. Through the chaos, unbidden, came the memory that always surfaced when death knocked. Lauren's terrified voice, 20 years gone but crystal clear. "Don't let go, Mikey. Please don't let go." The trailer park flooding. Danny Adams' hand slipping from his grasp as the current took him. The choice between his sister and his best friend, made in a heartbeat that had defined every heartbeat since. "Not today," Mike snarled, forcing the memory down. He'd made his choice then. He'd live with it now. The ocean rushed up to meet him. Impact. The shuttle hit water like concrete, the crash webbing saving Mike's life while trying its best to cut him in half. His vision went white, then red, then black spotted as the cabin crumpled around him. Salt water geysered through rupturing seams, the taste of alien ocean flooding his mouth. Copper and brine and something else, something that made his sinuses burn. Move. Move or die. Mike's fingers fumbled with the harness release, his Navy training overriding the screaming in his ribs. The water was already at his chest, phosphorescent green where it caught the emergency lights. He grabbed the survival kit from under his seat, waterproof, thank Christ, and kicked out the side hatch. The storm hit him like a living thing. Waves tall as buildings crashed over the sinking shuttle. Rain hammered down in sheets so thick he could barely breathe. But there, through the chaos, he saw them. 2 small figures in the water, their bodies glowing faint green against the dark, arms flailing as they fought to stay afloat. Children. There were children in this hell. Mike didn't think. 20 years of guilt made the choice for him. He dove. The ocean was warmer than he expected, almost blood temperature. His ribs screamed with each stroke, but he pushed through the pain, riding the surge toward the struggling figures. A wave lifted him, and for a moment he saw them clearly. Small humanoid forms with skin that seemed to shimmer, their mouths open in silent screams the storm swallowed whole. He reached the first child, a girl, maybe 6 years old, with huge dark eyes and a face that was almost human, except for the faint scaling along her jawline. She thrashed against him in panic until he got an arm around her chest, holding her head above water. The second child, smaller, had already gone under. Mike dove, his free hand searching blindly in the phosphorescent murk until his fingers caught fabric. He hauled the boy up, got his tiny head above the surface. Both children were unconscious now, dead weight in his arms. Mike kicked toward what he hoped was shore, his body remembering old lifeguard training from Galveston beaches. The storm fought him for every meter, trying to tear the children from his grip, but he held on with the desperate strength of a man who'd already let one child slip away. His boots hit sand. A wave drove him to his knees, nearly tearing the girl from his grasp, but he struggled upright, dragging both children onto the beach. The sand glowed beneath his bleeding palms, Bioluminescent, he realized dimly, reacting to pressure or heat. "Come on," he gasped, dropping to his knees beside the children. The girl first. He tilted her head back, sealed his mouth over hers, and breathed. Her lips were surprisingly warm, and there was that taste again, copper and sea and something floral. One breath, two, three. She convulsed, vomiting seawater that glowed faintly green. Her eyes fluttered open, fixed on his face with an expression of pure terror before she scrambled away, coughing. The boy next. Same process, same copper flower taste, same violent return to life. Mike sat back on his heels, chest heaving, ribs on fire, watching the two children huddled together in the rain. They stared at him like he was a monster from their nightmares. "It's okay," he said, hands raised peacefully. "I'm not going to hurt." The harpoon slammed into the sand inches from his knee. They materialized from the storm like ghosts given flesh, warriors in armor that seemed to be made from overlapping scales, each piece shifting and catching the phosphorescent glow from the sand. All women, all tall, all with skin in shades of green from jade to emerald. Their weapons were coral and bone and metal salvaged from God knew where, but the way they held them spoke of long practice and longer grudges. "Neva Chuani!" The lead warrior's voice cut through the storm. She was taller than the rest, her armor more elaborate, with bone charms woven into thick green hair that the rain had plastered to her skull. Her eyes were the color of deep water, and they burned with a hatred so pure Mike could feel its heat from 3 meters away. She said something else in their language, gestured with a coral-tipped spear. Mike stayed very still, hands visible, as more warriors surrounded him. One of them scooped up the children. They went willingly, casting fearful glances back at him. "Human," the lead warrior said, and the word dripped with such venom that Mike flinched. She knew what he was. Somehow, on this unnamed world, she knew exactly what he was. The spear point pressed against his throat, just hard enough to dimple the skin. The warrior leaned close, and he could smell her, salt and anger and that same floral copper scent, stronger now, almost intoxicating. Her lips pulled back from teeth that were white and slightly sharper than they should be. "You will answer for your crimes," she said in accented but clear English. "All of them." Before Mike could respond, something cracked against the back of his skull, and the phosphorescent world went dark. He woke to pain and the sound of falling water. Mike's hands were bound above his head with something that felt like kelp but was stronger than steel cable. His ribs screamed with each breath, and his skull throbbed in time with his heartbeat. He was in some kind of structure, walls of woven grass and coral, a floor of smooth stone that had been worn by countless feet. Through gaps in the walls he could hear voices arguing in that liquid language, could smell smoke and cooking food and the ever-present salt of the sea. "You're awake." The voice was different, softer, more measured. A woman stepped from the shadows, and Mike's breath caught despite himself. She was stunning in a way that had nothing to do with human beauty standards and everything to do with presence. Tall and graceful, with skin like polished jade and eyes that seemed to shift from green to gold as she moved through the filtered light. Her clothing was simpler than the warriors', a wrapped garment that left her arms bare, revealing intricate scarification that looked like flowing water. She carried a wooden bowl that steamed with something that smelled of herbs and the sea. "I am Orina," she said, kneeling beside him with fluid grace. "I am a healer. You saved 2 children from the lower houses. This is why you still breathe." She dipped a cloth in the bowl and began cleaning the blood from his face. Her touch was clinical but gentle, and that floral copper scent was stronger near her, making his head swim. "Where am I?" Mike's voice came out rough, his throat raw from seawater. "You are on the islands of wind and salt." She paused, studying his face with those color-shifting eyes. You are very far from your star lanes, human. My shuttle crashed. I was trying to... I know what you were trying. Her fingers pressed against his carotid artery, taking his pulse. The touch lasted longer than necessary, and her pupils dilated slightly. Your heart speaks of fear, but not deception. This is unusual for your kind. My kind? Mike tested the bonds. No give at all. Lady, I don't even know where I am. I've never been here before. No, she agreed, now checking his ribs with careful fingers that made him hiss in pain. But others of your species have. 18 years ago. They came with fire and took our daughters. They brought the plague that killed hundreds. Her voice remained level, but he could hear the strain beneath it. The matriarch will decide your fate at the cistern. I suggest you prepare your words carefully. The entrance flap whipped open, and the warrior from the beach strode in. Up close, Mike could see the details he'd missed. Ritual scars along her arms, a necklace of what looked like human teeth, the way her armor seemed to breathe with her body. She was beautiful in the way a storm was beautiful, powerful, dangerous, and absolutely destructive to anything in her path. Why do you waste medicine on it? She demanded in that liquid language, though Mike caught the tone well enough. Arena responded calmly, not looking up from her work. The warrior, Avely, he heard Arena say, grabbed Mike's chin, forcing him to meet her eyes. This close, he could see flecks of gold in the deep green, could feel the heat radiating from her skin. You understand nothing, human, she said in English, her accent turning the words into weapons. But you will learn. You will learn what your kind did to us, and then you will beg for the death I wanted to give you on the beach. She released him with a shove that sent fresh lightning through his ribs, but as she turned to leave, her hand brushed the ochre paint at her belt, and something flickered across her face, not just anger, but pain so deep it had fossilized into rage. They dragged him to the cistern as the sun set, painting the sky in shades of purple and green Mike had never seen on any world. The cistern itself was a monument to both engineering and desperation, a massive bowl carved from volcanic glass, easily 30 meters across, with channels radiating out like veins. Water flowed through some of these channels, but Mike could see the careful rationing, the way guards stood at every valve and spigot. This was a society built around scarcity, around the careful husbanding of every drop. The crowd that gathered was entirely female, from elderly matrons with skin like Verdi antique marble to children who peeked from behind their mother's legs. Their clothing ranged from simple wraps to elaborate robes that seemed to designate rank. The more pearls and shells, the higher the status, Mike guessed. They all stared at him with expressions that ranged from curiosity to naked hatred. At the center of it all stood the matriarch. Selu Nefra was ancient in the way that redwoods were ancient, not just old, but monumental. Her green skin had darkened to nearly black at the extremities, and her hair was white as sea foam, woven with shells and small bones that clicked as she moved. She wore robes that seemed to be made from pearl itself, layers of iridescent fabric that caught the dying light. On her wrist was a bracelet of carved beads, and she turned it constantly, each click marking some internal count. So, she said, her English perfect and cold as winter current, another human comes to our shores. Tell me, stranger, what lie will you offer? That you are a traitor, perhaps? A diplomat? Or will you claim ignorance as the last ones did before they showed their true nature? Mike stood as straight as his bonds allowed. The entire crowd had gone silent, waiting. I'm Lieutenant Mike Harrison, Search and Rescue Division, Colonial Navy, he said clearly. My shuttle suffered a navigation failure and crashed. I don't know anything about traders or raids. I saw children drowning and I saved them. That's all. That's all, Nefra repeated, and the crowd stirred. 18 years ago, humans came to our shores. They also claimed to be explorers. We gave them water, food, shelter, And in return, she raised her voice, addressing the crowd as much as him. They burned the salt reefs. They took 43 of our daughters onto their ships. They brought disease that killed hundreds more. The few who escaped their ships told of horrors, of our people sold, experimented upon, bred like animals. The crowd's anger was a physical thing now, pressing in from all sides. Mike saw Avely's hand go to her coral blade, saw the anticipation in her eyes. "I'm sorry," Mike said, and meant it, "but I wasn't part of that. I've never even heard of all humans are part of it." Avely stepped forward, barely controlled. "You spread across the stars like plague, taking what you want, destroying what you don't understand." "Enough." Orina's voice cut through the noise. She stepped from the crowd, moving to stand between Mike and the matriarch. "He saved shell-home children. My examination shows no deception in his vital signs. If we kill him for the crimes of others, how are we different from them?" "You speak of mercy for the enemy?" An older woman in elaborate robes stepped forward, clearly one of the elite. "Your own mother knew the cost of human treachery, child." Something flickered across Orina's face, pain, quickly hidden. "My mother knew many things. Not all of them were truth." She turned to the matriarch. "I invoke the right of claim. The human will be my responsibility. If he proves false, I will end him myself." The crowd erupted. The right of claim, Mike gathered, was not something used lightly. But before Nephra could respond, Avely laughed, sharp and bitter. "You would claim this thing? Then share the claim with me, healer. You may trust in mercy, but I trust in vigilance. He will be our responsibility, to guard, to watch, and to execute if necessary." It was clearly not normal protocol, but Nephra seemed to consider it. Her bead counting increased, click, 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 in the tense silence. "Very well," she said finally. "The human lives for now. Shared claim between the houses of Pearl and Net. Avely will guard his body. Orina will guard his health. And if he proves false..." She looked directly at Mike, and he saw centuries of loss in those ancient eyes. "The children he saved will throw the first stones." The storm hit without mercy. Mike heard it coming first, a sound like freight trains colliding, like the ocean itself had grown lungs and learned to scream. The phosphorescent tide pools began draining backward, water fleeing toward the sea as if magnetized. Birds he hadn't known existed erupted from the canopy in clouds of green and gold, their cries sharp with panic. "Move!" Avely's hand clamped around his arm hard enough to bruise. "Tidal surge! We need high ground now." She dragged him from the guard post where he'd been repairing nets under supervision, his rehabilitation through labor, as Nephra had termed it. Orina appeared from the healer's lodge, her medical satchel already slung across her body, those color-shifting eyes wide with urgency. "The caves," she said, and Avely nodded grimly. They ran. Mike's ribs had mostly healed over the past weeks, but the pace Avely set had him gasping. The two women moved like they'd been born to this terrain, feet finding purchase on wet stone and tangled roots while he stumbled and slipped. Behind them the sound grew, not just wind but water, massive amounts of water, coming fast. The first wave hit the village as they reached the cliff trail. Mike turned despite Avely's cursing and saw it. A wall of jade-green water 3 stories tall, crowned with phosphorescent foam that glowed like ghost fire. It struck the lower settlements with the force of orbital bombardment. Houses made of coral and hardwood exploded into splinters. The ancient dock where he'd been working moments ago simply ceased to exist. "Don't look back," Orina said, her hand finding his. Her skin was fever-warm despite the cold rain, that copper floral scent stronger when she was afraid. "Just climb." The cave mouth yawned before them, a natural hollow in the volcanic cliff face. They dove inside just as the second wave hit, this one reaching high enough to send spray into the entrance. The cave shook, dust and small stones raining from the ceiling. "Further in," Avely commanded, producing a bioluminescent torch from her pack, some kind of treated kelp that glowed pale green when exposed to air. "The surge will reach the first chamber." They descended into the earth, following a path worn smooth by centuries of use. The walls were volcanic glass in places, reflecting their torchlight in fractured rainbows. Mike could hear water behind them, pursuing them into the cave system with a sound like hungry breathing. The second chamber was larger, with a ceiling that disappeared into darkness. But even as they entered, Mike could see water beginning to pool at the entrance they'd come through. "There." Arena pointed to a natural shelf of rock about 3 meters up. "We can wait it out there." They climbed, Mike's hands leaving bloody prints on the stone. He'd torn them open on the cliff trail without noticing. Arena made a disapproving sound and pulled him up the last meter herself, her strength surprising for someone so graceful. The ledge was perhaps 4 meters wide and twice that deep, enough space to sit, but not to spread out. Avely immediately began pulling supplies from her pack, emergency rations, a water purifier, medical supplies she must have grabbed from Arena's stores. Always the warrior, always prepared. "How long?" Mike asked, watching black water begin to fill the chamber below. "Until the moons separate," Arena said, settling against the back wall. 8 hours, perhaps 10. "The tidal compression," Avely added, her voice tight with controlled anger, "happens once every 3 years when both moons align. The houses should have been prepared, should have had emergency stores ready, but—" She cut herself off, jaw clenching. "But the matriarch's been hoarding," Mike finished. He'd been on the island long enough to see the patterns, the way resources flowed up but never down. Avely's eyes snapped to his, surprised. Then something shifted in her expression. Not quite approval, but maybe the beginning of it. The cold came with the water. As the flood filled the lower chamber, the temperature plummeted. The volcanic rock that had held the day's heat became a heat sink, drawing warmth from their bodies. Within an hour, Mike could see his breath misting in the torchlight. "We need to conserve heat," Arena said, already pulling a thermal blanket from Avely's pack, thin as paper but designed to reflect body heat. "The rotation protocol." Avely's laugh was bitter. "You want to cuddle with the human?" "I want to survive the night," Arena replied evenly. "And so do you. Middle position rotates every 2 hours. It's simple thermodynamics." "I'll take first watch," Mike offered. "I run hot anyway." That was true. His baseline temperature had always been a degree above normal, something that had served him well in space but made tropical assignments miserable. Here, though, with these 2 women whose body temperature seemed to run even higher, it might be an advantage. They arranged themselves carefully. Mike sat against the back wall with Arena pressed against his right side and Avely on his left. The thermal blanket wasn't quite large enough for 3, requiring them to press close. He could feel every breath they took, could smell the sea salt in Avely's hair and the medicinal herbs that clung to Arena's clothes. "Your heart rate is elevated," Arena observed, her hand resting on his chest in what she probably thought was a clinical manner. "Must be the weather," Mike managed. "Must be the company," Avely corrected, and he could hear the smirk in her voice even though she faced away from him. Her back pressed against his side, and through the thin fabric of her wrap, he could feel the raised lines of ritual scars. They sat in silence for a while, listening to the water rise. The bioluminescent torch flickered, casting dancing shadows on the cave walls. Mike found himself hyper-aware of every point of contact. Arena's thigh against his, Avely's shoulder blade pressing into his ribs, the way their breathing had unconsciously synchronized. "Tell me about Earth," Arena said suddenly. "Not the colonies or the Navy, Earth itself." Mike considered. "It's complicated, beautiful in places, ruined in others. We've got oceans like yours, but most of them are too polluted to swim in. The cities go up for kilometers, but the old forests are mostly gone. So you spread to the stars, Avery said. And there was venom there, but also curiosity. Some of us had to. Others. Mike remembered the recruiting posters, the promises of adventure and purpose. Others were running from something. What were you running from? Arena's question was gentle, but it hit like a physical blow. The memory surfaced before he could stop it. The Tiberian Station disaster. 3 children trapped in a burning cargo hold, the polymer walls melting, releasing toxic fumes. His CO Thompson, horrible coincidence, ordering immediate evacuation. The ship's structural integrity failing. Mike had disobeyed, grabbed an emergency respirator and gone in anyway. He'd gotten the kids out, but by the time he emerged, Thompson had been forced to seal a breach manually. The decompression had taken him in seconds. I saved 3 children, Mike said quietly. Cost my commanding officer his life. Court-martial said I made the right choice, but they discharged me anyway. Conduct unbecoming. Failure to follow direct orders. You chose the children, Arena said. It wasn't a question. Always, Mike replied. I always choose the children. Avery shifted against him, and he felt her hand find his in the darkness. Just for a moment, a squeeze that might have been understanding or might have been warning. Then she pulled away. The 3-breath ritual, she said abruptly. We need to conserve oxygen. The water's sealing us in. She was right. The air had grown thicker, harder to pull into lungs. They turned to face each other in the narrow space, forming a tight triangle. Mike found himself looking into Arena's eyes while Avery's breath warmed his neck. Together, Arena instructed, foreheads touching. Share the air, slow and steady. They leaned in until their foreheads met, creating a small pocket of shared space. Mike could feel the pulse in Arena's temple, could taste Avery's exhale, salt and something sweeter, like the fruit they'd shared at last week's feast. They breathed in unison, in for 3, hold for 3, out for 3. The intimacy was overwhelming. In the darkness, with only touch and breath and heartbeat, the boundaries between them blurred. Avery's fingers found the scars on his ribs, shrapnel from a rescue gone wrong, tracing them with unexpected gentleness. Arena's hand covered Avery's, not pushing it away but joining the exploration. Your skin is strange, Avery murmured against his ear. So much cooler than ours, but it holds heat differently. Human physiology is fascinating, Arena added, and there was something in her voice that wasn't entirely clinical. Your healing rate, your temperature regulation, the way your muscles respond to stress. You two going to dissect me or keep me warm? Mike asked, trying for humor but hearing his voice come out rougher than intended. Both, Avery said, and for the first time since he'd crashed, he heard her really laugh, not bitter or mocking but genuine. But warmth first. You're no good to us frozen. They found Kessa's betrayal at dawn. The water had receded enough to leave the cave, though the path back to the village was treacherous with mud and debris. Mike's emergency beacon, the one he'd hidden in the medical supplies, the one he'd been saving as an absolute last resort, was gone. She took it while we slept, Arena said, examining the disturbed supplies. Kessa, I can smell her here, fear and desperation. Avery went very still, the kind of stillness that preceded violence. My own lieutenant, my own blood-sworn sister. Her voice was level, controlled, terrifying. I'll kill her myself. Wait. Mike caught her arm as she turned to leave. She spun on him, and for a moment he thought she'd strike him, but he held on. Think, why would she take it? What could she gain? Trade, Arena said softly. The matriarch has been restricting water to the lower houses. Kessa's family. Her younger sisters are probably dying of thirst. She betrayed us for water? Avery's voice cracked. She could have asked. Could she? Arena challenged. When did the net houses last receive their full allocation? When did any of us last have enough? They found Kessa at the cistern, kneeling before Nephra. The beacon sat between them, its alien technology obvious among the coral and stone. The matriarch's counting bracelet clicked faster than usual. Excitement or anxiety, Mike couldn't tell. "You've done well, child," Nephra was saying. "Your sisters will have water for the season, and with this, we can finally send a message to our enemies." "No." Mike stepped forward, and every guard in the plaza raised their weapons. "That beacon isn't just a communicator. It's a locator. You activate that, and you're not just sending a message. You're painting a target on this entire island." Nephra's ancient eyes fixed on him. "Perhaps that's what we want, human. Perhaps it's time your kind learned what it means to lose something precious. By bringing them here? By starting a war you can't win?" Mike looked around at the gathered crowd, mostly lower houses, all desperate, all angry. "They have orbital bombardment capabilities, weapons that can turn this island to glass. Is revenge worth extinction?" "Maybe," Avery said quietly, and everyone turned to look at her. "Maybe it is." But she was looking at Kessa, not Nephra. The younger woman was crying silently, shoulders shaking. Avery walked to her slowly, each step measured. She knelt, bringing them to eye level. "Your sisters," Avery said. "How long have they been without water?" 3 days, Kessa whispered. "The youngest is only 4. She stopped crying yesterday, stopped asking." Avery closed her eyes. When she opened them, she looked older, exhausted. "Arena's right. This isn't betrayal. This is survival." She stood, addressing Nephra. "The beacon stays inactive, and the lower houses get their full water allocation starting now." "You don't make demands of me, child," Nephra said, but there was uncertainty in her voice now. "I'm not making demands," Avery replied. "I'm stating facts. Because if you activate that beacon, if you bring human warships here, I won't fight them. I'll fight you." The plaza went silent. The guards looked between Avery and Nephra, uncertain. The matriarch's hand went to her counting bracelet, clicking faster and faster. Then Arena laughed, soft, bitter, nothing like her usual gentle demeanor. "Oh, Mother," she said, and everyone gasped. "You're not even surprised, are you? You knew this would happen. You've been restricting water to force exactly this kind of desperation." She reached into her satchel and pulled out something Mike hadn't seen before, leather-bound ledgers, water-stained and old. "I found these in the compression caves. Your mother's records, matriarch, trade agreements, bills of sale." Her voice grew harder with each word. "You've been selling our people to humans for 30 years, creating the very hatred you claim to fight against." The crowd erupted. Guards moved to protect Nephra, but others turned their weapons on the matriarch herself. Mike saw the moment balanced on a knife's edge. One wrong word and there would be blood. "Stop," he said, and his voice carried in a way it shouldn't have, training from years of crisis management kicking in. "Look at yourselves. You're about to tear each other apart while the real enemy profits. You want justice? Fine. But justice isn't revenge, and it sure as hell isn't civil war." "What would you know of justice, human?" someone shouted from the crowd. "I know that every second you spend fighting each other is a second your children go without water," Mike replied. "I know that your real power isn't in weapons or beacons, it's in unity. And I know that if you activate that beacon out of spite, you'll lose everything." He turned to Nephra. "You want to send a message? I'll help you send one. But not with the beacon, with something better, something that shows you're not victims anymore." "What could you possibly offer?" Nephra asked, but he could see her calculating, adapting. "Knowledge," Mike said. "I can teach you water purification techniques that don't require off-world tech. Tidal generators for power, hydroponics for food production. Make yourselves independent and you won't need to trade daughters for supplies. And in return, Avery asked, stepping closer. Her hand found his arm, not grabbing, just touching, grounding. In return, we write new laws, a charter, water access for all houses, no more trading people, no more secrets. He looked at Orina, then Avery, and we do it together, or not at all. The silence stretched. Then Kessa stood, still shaking, and walked to the beacon. She picked it up, cradled it for a moment, then smashed it against the stone. The crack echoed across the plaza like a gunshot. Together, she said, voice raw but determined. We survive together, or we don't survive at all. The sails appeared at first light, black against the green dawn. Mike stood on the watchtower's platform, the salvage binoculars cold against his face. 3 barges, heavily armed with that same symbol Avery had shown him in bitter midnight confessions, the mark of the Leviathan Trading Company. His stomach dropped as he caught details: mounted harpoon guns, electrified nets, cages built into the deck. Slavers. They'd come during the chaos of the tidal compression when the island's defenses were weakest. How long? Avery's voice came from behind him. She'd climbed the tower silently, a skill that still unnerved him after weeks of living under her guard. 20 minutes, maybe less. Mike lowered the binoculars, turned to face her. Morning light caught the jade planes of her face, the coiled readiness in her stance. They're running motor assists on the sails, modern tech. Her jaw tightened. We're not ready. The induction nets aren't fully positioned. The salt batteries need another hour to charge. Then we improvise. Mike was already moving, mind racing through contingencies. Get Orina and the engineers. We need every copper wire on this island, and we need it now. Avery caught his arm as he passed, her grip fierce. You could run. Take one of the fishing boats. Slip away in the confusion. They're not here for you. No, Mike said simply. They're here for you, and I'm not going anywhere. Something flickered across her face, surprise maybe, or something deeper. Then she was gone, vaulting over the platform's edge to slide down the support cables, her voice already raised in warning cries. The village exploded into motion. Mike found himself at the center of organized chaos, translating between Orina's medical precision and Avery's warrior instincts. They had minutes, not hours. The children, Orina said, appearing at his elbow with an armload of copper coiling. Her usual calm had sharpened to something diamond-hard. The resonance buoys, if we can synchronize them with the migration. Mike understood immediately. The stingray-like creatures that pass through during tidal events, their bioelectric fields could amplify the induction net's pulses. But we'd need perfect timing. Then we'd better be perfect. She pressed something into his hand, a small vial of the ochre paint, warm to the touch. Avery says you'll need this, for the fight. Before he could ask what she meant, the first warning horn sounded. The raiders were in visual range. They came in like predators, engines cutting to silence as they drifted into the shallows. Mike crouched behind a screen of woven kelp, watching the lead barge lower its boarding ramp. The raiders were human, scarred, weathered, armed with a mix of projectile weapons and energy stunners. They moved with practiced efficiency, securing the beach before their captain descended. Bren Korax looked exactly like the monster from Avery's nightmares should look, tall, broad, with skin turned to leather by alien suns and eyes the color of old ice. He wore no armor, just practical cloth and a pistol at his hip, supremely confident in his own dominance. I know you're watching, he called out in accented English, his voice carrying across the empty beach. We're not here to fight. Just want to trade, same as always. 30 young ones, healthy, and we leave you in peace for another decade. Mike felt Avery tense beside him, her whole body vibrating with barely contained rage. 18 years of hatred, 18 years of imagining this moment. Signal, Mike whispered. Now. 3 children appeared at the water's edge, scattering crushed shells into the shallows. The fragments glittered as they sank, and within seconds, a low thrumming filled the air. The migration had begun, thousands of electric rays responding to the sonic call, their bodies generating bioelectric fields that turned the entire bay into a living battery. "What?" Korax started, then his eyes widened as he saw what they'd done. Mike yanked the manual switch Maris had rigged, sending power surging through the induction nets they'd stretched across the bay floor. The pulse, amplified by the ray's natural electricity, hit the barge's engines like a hammer blow. Motors seized, electronics fried, lights exploded in showers of sparks. "Now!" Avely roared, and the beach erupted. Warriors poured from hidden positions, but these weren't the desperate defenders Korax expected. They moved in coordinated teams, using the non-lethal weapons Mike had helped them develop: weighted nets, foam that hardened on contact, sonic disruptors that left enemies reeling but alive. Mike found himself fighting beside Orina, her medical precision translated into combat efficiency. She moved like water, never where attacks expected her to be, her staff striking pressure points with surgical accuracy. That floral copper scent was stronger when she fought, he noticed absurdly, like her body temperature spiked with adrenaline. "Behind you," she said calmly, and Mike ducked as a raider's stun baton whistled over his head. He came up inside the man's guard, 3 quick strikes he'd learned from Avely, and the raider dropped. Then he saw her. Avely had carved a path straight to Korax, leaving unconscious raiders in her wake. She stood before him now, coral blade in hand, everything she was focused on this moment. "You," Korax said, and there was something in his voice, not fear, but recognition. "You have her eyes." "My mother's eyes," Avely snarled. "The ones you closed forever when you took her. Is that what you think happened?" Korax lowered his weapon, didn't even try to defend himself. "Child, your mother." "Don't!" Avely's blade pressed against his throat. "Don't you dare speak of her." But Mike was close enough to see Korax's face, and what he saw there wasn't the expression of a caught monster. It was grief, old and worn smooth like sea glass. "She walked onto my ship herself," Korax said quietly. 12 children were hiding in the reef caves. My men wanted to burn them out. Your mother offered herself in trade, her life for theirs. I took the deal." Avely's blade trembled. "Lies." "Truth," Orina said softly, appearing beside them. In her hands were more of those water-damaged ledgers. "I found the records, Avely. The 12 children. They're listed here, alive, grown now with children of their own. Your mother saved them." The beach had gone silent, everyone watching this moment balance on a knife's edge. "She was pregnant," Korax continued, his voice steady despite the blade at his throat. "With you. She made me promise to take her far enough away that she couldn't swim back, couldn't weaken. She knew if she stayed, she'd choose you over those 12 children, so she chose them all." Avely's scream was raw, animal, 20 years of pain given voice. The blade fell from nerveless fingers. She dropped to her knees in the sand, and Mike moved without thinking, catching her before she collapsed completely. She turned into his chest, fingers clawing at his shirt, her body shaking with sobs that sounded like they were tearing her apart. "Why?" she gasped against him. "Why didn't anyone tell me?" "Because the truth was harder than the lie." Nefra's voice came from behind them. The matriarch stood at the water's edge, no longer in ceremonial robes but simple worker's cloth, her white hair bound back. "Your hatred gave you strength. The truth would have broken you." "The truth sets her free," Mike said, still holding Avely as she shook. He looked at Korax, who hadn't moved despite the blade no longer threatening him. "You're done here. No more trading, no more taking. This ends now." Korax studied him, those ice-pale eyes calculating. "You're not from here. But you're not regular Navy either. Who are you? I'm the person offering you a choice, Mike replied. Leave now, never return, and spread word that these islands are under quarantine, deadly algae bloom, toxic to human life, or stay and face justice for 18 years of slavery. Justice. Corax laughed, bitter and tired. Boy, there is no justice in the void, just survivors and the dead. I kept more alive than I took. That's the best any of us can do. No, Avali said, pulling away from Mike's embrace. Her face was streaked with tears, but her voice was steady. The best we can do is better than what was done to us. She stood slowly, picked up her fallen blade. For a moment, everyone tensed. Then she drove it into the sand at Corax's feet. You'll face trial, she said, here, by our laws. And if the houses find you guilty, you'll serve your sentence here, helping rebuild what you helped destroy. She looked at the other raiders, most now restrained but conscious. All of you will. You'd make us slaves, one of them shouted. We'd make you citizens, Arena corrected, stepping forward with natural authority. With duties and rights and the chance to earn forgiveness, unless you'd prefer to swim home. The raiders looked at their dead engines, the impossibility of escape. One by one, they dropped their remaining weapons. The trial took 3 days. Mike watched from the witness platform as each raider faced the assembled houses. Some, like Corax, accepted their guilt with weary resignation. Others raged, demanded rights they'd never given their victims. But the new system held, fair, measured, focused on restoration rather than revenge. Maris Avon, the quiet engineer who'd finally found his voice, presented evidence with mechanical precision. The hidden drainage systems designed to flood poor quarters, the trade routes that brought weapons in exchange for people, the careful manipulation of resources to maintain control. When Nephra took the stand, she didn't defend herself. I counted every death, she said, that ancient voice carrying across the plaza. Every trade, every sacrifice, every necessary evil. I thought I was saving us. She removed her counting bracelet, the one she'd worn for 40 years, and threw it into the cistern. But I was only saving myself from making harder choices. They sentenced her to work the pumps in the lower quarter, maintaining the systems she'd once used as weapons. She accepted without protest, cutting her power braids herself in the ritual of submission. But the moment that broke Mike's heart came when the children, the ones she would have drowned, brought her water cups on her first day of labor. Simple kindness offered freely to someone who'd planned their deaths. Nephra had cried then, the first tears anyone had seen from her in decades. That's real justice, Arena murmured beside him, her hand finding his in the crowd. Not punishment, but the chance to earn redemption. The beacon weighed heavy in Mike's pocket. He'd repaired it in secret, using parts salvaged from the raiders' equipment. It could call Earth forces here within days, rescue for him, potential disaster for the islands. He climbed the wind tower at sunset, the device warm in his palm. Below, the village worked to integrate the former raiders. He could see Corax hauling stones for the new desalination plant, Avali supervising with sharp eyes but no cruelty. Children ran between the work crews, their laughter bright as the phosphorescent tide pools. This could all end with one transmission. He could go home, return to his life, pretend these weeks had been a dream. You're going to call them. Arena's voice didn't surprise him anymore. She moved like mist when she wanted to. I'm thinking about it, Mike admitted. She moved beside him, close enough that her warmth cut through the evening chill. We would understand. This isn't your world. But it could be. Avali appeared on his other side, and he wondered how long she'd been there, waiting. You've proven that humans and our people can coexist. You could be the bridge. Mike looked at the beacon, then at the two women who'd become more than captors, more than allies. Orina with her quiet strength and healing hands, Avery with her fierce protection and surprising tenderness, both bearing scars from human cruelty, both choosing to trust him anyway. He thought of Earth, polluted, overcrowded, always expanding because it couldn't fix itself. Then he looked at the islands, wounded but healing, choosing cooperation over conquest. He activated the beacon. Both women stepped back, betrayal flashing across their faces. But Mike wasn't sending a distress call. His fingers flew over the interface, reconfiguring the signal, embedding it with false data about toxic algae blooms, quarantine protocols, extreme biohazard warnings. Any ship that picked up this signal would mark these coordinates as off-limits for a generation. Then he brought the beacon down on the stone platform, smashing it to pieces. "My name is Mike Harrison," he said to the setting sun, to the assembled crowd that had gathered below. "I was a search and rescue pilot. I was a lot of things, but now, if you'll have me, I'd like to be something else." "What?" Avery asked, and there was hope in her voice. "Home," Mike said simply. "I'd like to be home." They performed the breath exchange there on the platform, in full view of everyone, 3 foreheads touching, sharing air and space and future. It wasn't their tradition, this configuration of 3, but traditions could evolve. The crowd below murmured, then someone started clapping. Soon the entire plaza rang with approval. "This is unprecedented," Orina whispered, her breath warm against his face. "Good," Avery said, and he could hear her smile. "Precedents are meant to be broken." 6 months later, Mike stood knee-deep in the cistern's maintenance channel, teaching a group of former raiders and island youth how to calibrate the new tidal generators. His skin had darkened from the sun, and he'd started wearing his hair long bound back with cord Avery had woven. "The key," he explained, adjusting the turbine angle, "is working with the water, not against it. Every tide has its own rhythm. Learn it, respect it, and it'll give you all the power you need." Kessa worked beside him, no longer bearing the shame of her betrayal but the pride of someone who'd earned redemption. She'd become one of the best engineers, her desperation transformed into determination. "Mike," a child's voice called from the plaza. "Miss Avery says, 'Come quick. Miss Orina found something.'" He climbed from the channel, water streaming from his work clothes. The child, one of the ones he'd saved that first day, grabbed his hand and pulled him toward the medical lodge. Inside, he found Avery and Orina bent over the ancient text they'd been translating. Both women looked up as he entered, their faces bright with discovery. "The migration patterns," Orina said excitedly. "They're not random. The creatures follow electromagnetic currents that we can map and predict." "Which means," Avery continued, "we can create shipping lanes that avoid them entirely. Safe passage for trade without disrupting the ecosystem." "Trade?" Mike raised an eyebrow. "You're thinking of opening the islands to trade?" "Controlled trade," Orina corrected. "On our terms. With the technology you've helped us develop, we have resources others need. Clean water, sustainable power, medical compounds from the local flora." "We're not hiding anymore," Avery said firmly. "We're not victims. We're going to show the universe that there's another way to live." Mike looked at these 2 remarkable women who'd chosen to share their lives with him, who'd transformed their trauma into strength, their isolation into independence. Orina moved to his right side, Avery to his left, their bodies fitting against his like they'd always belonged there. "Together?" he asked. "Together," they confirmed in unison. Outside, children launched paper gliders from the plaza. His Earth design improved with local materials, catching thermals that carried them impossibly high. He watched them soar and thought about messages in bottles, about bridges between worlds, about choosing to stay when you could run. The water charter had been signed. The pumps ran clean. Former enemies worked side by side. And in the evening light, as the phosphorescent tides began to glow, 3 silhouettes stood at the cistern's edge, no longer defined by the worlds they'd come from, but by the one they were building together.